Well, hello and welcome. My name is Mark Epner. I'm a Chicago-based pilot with over half of my 2,000 plus hours in a Cirrus SR-22. Currently, I fly this 2011 normally aspirated G3, but also fly other aircraft when the opportunity presents itself. I love flying every bit as much as you do and look for ways to share that common bond through multiple paths, including this channel, as well as Simple Flight Radio, which you can find at simpleflight.net. My goal for the channel is to share my passion for aviation with others that share that same sentiment and do so with an eye towards proficiency, safety, and fun. Well, as most of you know, I've had limited access to an airplane ever since my catastrophic engine failure. The shop that has been holding on to the plane has finally gotten caught up with some of their work, and we're next in line. As a matter of fact, I understand they started last week, and we should have our airplane back by the end of the month. I'm looking forward to sharing with you not only the pickup of the airplane, but all the questions that people had about the engine, the insurance process, and all of the things that we had to deal with in the meantime. So now the question is, how do you make an aviation video without an airplane? Well, with Oshkosh Air Ventures starting next Monday, I thought it would be of value to brief the NOTAM, this year called a notice, and the approach into Oshkosh. In the spirit of time, I'm going to stick to the topic of how I configure and fly the plane from my home airport, Chicago Executive. Anyone coming from Illinois can use the same process and waypoints. Today's discussion does not mean you can skip the 32-page notice. Quite the contrary, it's important to read it cover to cover and fly the approach in your head several times before actually flying in. Now, some of those things that you'll want to practice before departing is to ensure you know your power settings to fly at 90 knots and be able to do so while maintaining 1,800 feet MSL. If you need to go faster, there's an option to fly at 2,300 feet at a speed of 135 knots. Now, I'm not going to call myself an expert. I have flown into Oshkosh a few times, but I recommend flying with a companion that's familiar with airplane operations and being able to spot traffic and help with the navigation and communication. Aviate, navigate, and communicate is of critical importance for this flight. 3 other points of emphasis includes maintaining a sterile cockpit, proper fuel planning, and knowing your plan B. You might have to hold or divert for multiple reasons. Plan for it. I was unable to make AirVenture last year, and of course it was canceled the year prior. But in this year's NOTAM, or notice, there's a use of multiple approach waypoints available to ATC based on level of traffic. It's a great change because I recalled flying to the former initial waypoint of Ripon only to find a long line of planes forcing me to fly to the southwest in search of the end of the line. So let's get started. The NOTAM, yes, I know it's a notice, but I just like saying NOTAM, speaks to flying the Chicago area. I'm not going to cover it today, but do yourself a favor and familiarize yourself with that information. Also note, the NOTAM identifies Burlington Airport, KBUU, East Troy, 57 Charlie, and Hartford, KHXF, as a route for heading up to the show. Along the way, be aware of an air show in the Milwaukee area, which includes a TFR. Now, leaving from Pewaukee, Papa Whiskey Kilo, I set up the plane as follows. I enter the following flight plan into my GPS. KPWK, KBUU, 57 Charlie, KHXF, VPENV, VPPLK, VPGRN, VPRIP, VPFIS, and KOSH. Now, those last 2 you'll not use. Most of these should be visual, but it always helps to have them in the flight plan. Before I start, I will rebrief my power settings for 90 knots before I depart. I'll also confirm with the other passengers who has what duty, and a reminder that we're going to have a sterile cockpit after we pass over East Troy, 57 Charlie. Lastly, I will confirm my fuel, endurance, and weight and balance, as well as my Plan B options should I hit my personal minimums for fuel on board. I set up my radios as follows. On COM 1, I have, in this case, KPWK Tower 119.9. And in the backup on COM 1, I have 120.7, which is Fisk Approach. Now, once I leave executive's airspace, I will press the flip-flop button and move FISC approach to active, and I will load 118.5 in the standby position. 118.5 is Oshkosh Tower for any runway 9 or 27 operations. On COM 2, I'm going to have PWK ATIS as active, 124.2, and PWK ground and standby, 121.7. After receiving the ATIS, I flip-flop ground to active and enter 125.9, which is Oshkosh ATIS, into the standby frequency of COM 2. So I'm doing my air work with COM 1 and my ground and ATIS on COM 2. As I approach the active runway at Pewaukee, Chicago Executive, I will switch to COM 1 tower, and on COM 2, I will press the flip-flop and move Oshkosh ATIS to active and enter 126.6 for Oshkosh Tower, which is for operations on runway 1836, and that will go into COM 2 standby. So now we're flying. I'm going to fly over KBUU Burlington to 57 Charlie and then turn towards Hartford. Leaving 57 Charlie, I will confirm my landing light and all strobe and recognition lights are on. In years past, this is when we normally switch our transponder to standby, but the notice indicates this year we're going to leave the transponder on. Now is the time to start monitoring Oshkosh ATIS on COM 2 125.9. Once we've received that, we brief the procedures that we're going to need, including route, speed, altitude, and frequencies. Also, we're going to confirm our plan for getting to 1800 MSL, remembering to set the barometric pressure, and also be at 90 knots. Lastly, get your ground sign ready. Whether you're camping or VFR or FBO, have that sign ready. Now, I usually throw it on the top of the dashboard so I don't have to think about it, but in some cases, it'll reflect off your windscreen, and that can be distracting. So just have it nearby if you don't want to put it up on top of the glare shield. About 15 miles from your initial transition waypoint, confirm ATIS on COM 2, monitor FISC approach on COM 1, 120.7, and restate when you will start your descent to 1800. As you approach the transition waypoint, confirm you are at 90 knots and 1800 MSL with the correct altimeter setting. Now, as you approach that transition waypoint, scan for aircraft. If you see a line of aircraft, shift your scan to the southwest or west, depending on which waypoint is active. Be aware that aircraft can be approaching the waypoint from multiple directions. Find the last place in line and fly to that spot with a half mile behind the aircraft in front of you. Be aware some aircraft may not be able to even fly at 90 knots, so you may have to adjust accordingly. If you're behind such an aircraft, leave lots of space or get out of the line and rejoin. Flying the airplane is your job number one. Now, as you approach FISC, listen for your aircraft. If you watch the aircraft in front of you and it responds to the rock your wings request from ATC, you know you'll be next. That takes a little bit of the pressure off, and responding with a vigorous wing rock should earn you a nice rock from ATC. This is really important now. You must remain PIC. Do not skip your GUMPS check. Know the proper approach for each runway, including altitude and when to turn on that next leg of the pattern. General aviation gives all of us an opportunity to do something special that few people in this world get to do. Flying itself is one of those moments. But then there are those flights that just feel good when you make the logbook entry. Landing at a large Bravo airport or any airport that means something special to you. But then there is Oshkosh. Being part of the mass arrival, the wing rock, and the touching down on a colored dot all contribute to the smile and sense of accomplishment. If you're wondering what you should put in the logbook, I suggest just writing Kosh. It says it all. Until next time, blue skies and tailwinds.